CM Punk. Probably one of the most rare careers of being at the top, but never quite being at the top. It doesn't make sense what I'm saying because he, in our hearts, was the top guy. But when it came to main eventing pay per views, he was always semi main eventing, unless he was facing, of course, Mr. John Cena. But one of the biggest upsets out of CM Punk's entire career was that he never got to main event WrestleMania. But was he truly a main event superstar in many people's books? Well, let's take a look back at his career, where he was part of ECW, probably was the best part of that entire brand in its dying days. Like the second it went to shit, he was the best part of it. He won Money in a Bank twice. Cashed in the first time, was a failure. Second time, it was even better because he turned heel against probably one of the most over superstars at the time, that being Jeff Hardy. Then in 2010, he formed the Straight Edge Society, was irrelevant. It went down the shitter. You could even say that he retired in 2010 because a lot of people don't even remember some of the stuff he did that year. Most of the time, he was on commentary. And then 2011 hit with that infamous pipe bomb that everybody still talk about to this day. And I can't believe that it has actually been almost an entire 10-year since that incident, the pipe bomb. Well, that is the night where CM Punk told the truth, broke character, and changed the business, which hasn't been done in a while, breaking kayfabe and turning wrestling to what it is today. Honestly, without that pipe bomb, we would have not gotten guys like Daniel Bryan, Finn Balor, AJ Styles, what have you. Those guys would not be at the top without that infamous promo, because he told the truth of how guys have busted their ass off time after time, and they just focus on John Cena and all these other guys. And the fact that we already confirmed that at WrestleMania 28, the main event was already going to be Rock and John Cena. So no matter what happened that show, that was going to be the main event, regardless. And honestly, that was the one time I will disagree with CM Punk. I don't think he deserved the main event of WrestleMania 28. The main event should have been The Rock and John Cena. We can all agree on that. Matter of fact, it was one of the highest grossing WrestleManias just for that match alone. You could argue the end of an era helped, but it was pretty damn near close. The attendance was 78,363. So clearly, that match alone sold money. I mean, the poster was just Rock and Cena itself, and the buy rate itself was 1,002,017. Like, that's how big of a show this was. So you could have put anything on the card, but that match alone could have saved it. But then we also had the end of an era, which is another match that people were anticipating the most. But what was the third most anticipated match? Was it Sheamus and Bryan? No. Was it Team Johnny and Team Teddy? No. Other matches? No. The third option would probably be CM Punk and Chris Jericho, the best in the world versus the best in the world. One of the best hyped storylines in a while. Probably the best built story involving uh, CM Punk, the top champion, and Chris Jericho, the guy who we never expected to come back. This was a really good feud. And people actually hate this match. CM Punk and Chris Jericho at WrestleMania 28. I will say this. The Extreme Rules 2012 match was even better. Hell, their Payback 2004 13 match was better than this. These guys have had better matches over the years. This one, yes, was the weakest, but um, was a pretty good match. But clearly, it wasn't the main event. There's no way you were gonna have CM Punk and Chris Jericho main event over John Cena and The Rock. It would be like making Chris Jericho main event against Rock and Hulk Hogan, and he puts over Triple H. Oh wait, that did happen. Moving on, CM Punk's career, you could tell that he was killing it as the WWE champion. He had great matches with Daniel Bryan, like I mentioned, Chris Jericho already. And lo and behold, good old Mr. John Cena, the face of the WWE. And sure enough, to the surprise of everybody, CM Punk turned heel. And that was in order because The Rock wanted to face a heel and Vince McMahon begged CM Punk to turn heel. He didn't want to because that would bring down the merch, but he did it for Vince. He did it for Vince McMahon. And I think after all the hard work that CM Punk put in 2012 as a WWE champion, both a face and a heel, and despite him not main eventing every single WrestleMania, I mean pay per view, I should say, they really dropped the ball because it was like all that hard work and you don't main event WrestleMania. That is pretty damn upsetting. He drops the belt to The Rock at the Royal Rumble. Um, he loses to The Rock yet again at the Elimination Chamber, and then he loses another chance against John Cena to re-enter into the match. And then they gave him to The Undertaker because The Undertaker had to be at this WrestleMania and CM Punk had nothing else to do. And lo and behold, that same WrestleMania, we had 80,676 in attendance. The buy rate was 1,039,000. Not the not as big as WrestleMania 28 buy rate, but honestly, the the ratings, the buy rate, if CM Punk were to be in the main event, would probably be slightly lower. With that said, who gives a shit? It still would have hit the million mark or at least up to there. But you mean to tell me that CM Punk did all that hard work for you, Vince, and all he ever asked was the main event of WrestleMania? Now, there is stories that CM Punk is a bit of a prick. You've heard it from fans, you've heard it from wrestlers, you've heard it from everybody. But lo and behold, so was Hulk Hogan. Matter of fact, Hulk Hogan was an even bigger asshole than CM Punk. Triple H could even be considered in the asshole category. Um, but CM Punk, who proved to the world that he is a top tier talent, one of the best in the world, pun intended, and he couldn't even be up there with John Cena and The Rock, a match that was once in a lifetime. Heard it just because we needed The Undertaker in the match. Why did we need The Undertaker? He should have retired at 20-0. A lot of people have argued that he should have continued on. Or hell, some people made this argument. I used to say that this should have happened, but in the long run, I say, yeah, I'm glad we got what we got. But people have said that we should have gotten CM Punk and John Cena in the main event and The Rock and The Undertaker. I'm sorry, I did not want to see that show. I did not want to see that mix. WrestleMania 29 overall was a pretty bad WrestleMania to say the least. The fact that the World Heavyweight Championship match was Alberto Del Rio and Jack Swagger, two mid-carders to say the least. I mean, Alberto Del Rio, you could say was a headliner, you could say whatever, but for the most part, the guy just wrestled like a mid-carder. Chris Jericho put over some guy named, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Is it Fandango? Uh, So yeah, this was just a pretty bad WrestleMania. I mean, and it gave us The Rock and John Cena too, which was twice in a lifetime, multiple finishers, multiple nonsense, And people, the positive thing that people say about this WrestleMania is that it gave us CM Punk and The Undertaker, which was by far the best match on the show. But it's also, to me personally, the most overrated match I have ever seen. Like, I remember I was like, yeah, this is a good match. I really had a good time watching this match. But it wasn't as great as everybody else claims it to be. Uh, just because the name CM Punk. The only reason why it was the match of the night is because honestly there was no other option on that show. But I remember people giving it 5 stars. Uh, it was just insane how much they put in. But then let's look at WrestleMania 30, which gave us the attendance, which was 75,167, which is a little bit lower than than last year. But the buy rate, let's check out the buy rate. The buy rate was 69,000. Yeah, that was way too low. But part of the reason, I honestly do blame WWE on this one. They were just um like they had to change the stuff at the last minute. If they simply just gave us what we wanted from the beginning, we could have trusted them. So many people just like said, "No, we're not watching it." And where does CM Punk involve in all this? What if CM Punk was the one who took Daniel Bryan's spot? If you guys watch Palana Productions video, where it's what if CM Punk never left 2014, he originally replaced Daniel Bryan with CM Punk, and honest to God, it was a pretty good rebooking of it. It was the most accurate thing ever, but it definitely would hurt uh, the Yes movement down the road. Um, and there was even talks of a contract dispute, like where CM Punk. I mean, we all know the story of him getting fired on his wedding. But what if he didn't? What if he was able to come back at WrestleMania 31? And maybe this time he headlines against Brock Lesnar. That would have been great for business. I mean, the buy rate um for that one, the buy rate was 76,976, which is way way um way lower. So I think the attendance was better at WrestleMania 31, but maybe you could say there was more seats, or they had Sting and Triple H, which is a massive match to talk about. Or hell, it was the first time we saw the Undertaker since the streak got broken. So WrestleMania 31 had a lot of advantages, despite the few being the storylines for WrestleMania 31 being god awful. But the buy rate 29 or 259,000, which was actually lower than WrestleMania 30. So I don't know who the hell, these buy rate numbers are so damn confusing. But the point is, it didn't matter because wrestling was not even selling like as big as it was back in the day. So why not please the fans for once? People. I mean, I get it that you want to please to the casual viewing audience, but give us something like wrestling fans, old wrestling fans, people who only stick around for WrestleMania. They love nostalgia more than anything in the world. But they also need to see who is around more. So imagine if you bust your ass off for 5 years at the same job, and someone who used to be great back in the day came back out of retirement or something and then took your spot. You'd be upset. And that is why CM Punk even left in the first place. CM Punk was definitely worthy of the main event of WrestleMania. The problem, I guess, is that they were too scared to see the buy rates get lower. I mean, the numbers, as Scott Steiner once said, the numbers don't lie, Vince, and they spell disaster for you. Um, but yeah, it's so disappointing. CM Punk is another guy that deserved the main event. So that's two in a row that I've talked about people who deserve the main event of WrestleMania at least once. Ric Flair and CM Punk. Obviously, Ric Flair deserves it more than CM Punk. No questions about it. But CM Punk, when he was on his prime, I mean, he busted his ass off. I mean, Daniel Bryan didn't even want the main event of WrestleMania 30, but he got it because WWE was so desperate that they had no choice but to put Daniel Bryan in the main event. And it definitely did lead to an amazing story, to say the least, for Daniel Bryan, but that's a whole different video in itself. Uh, if CM Punk were to come back and return to the ring and wrestle in the main event of WrestleMania, it's kind of be like too little too late. Like, yes, it's great that he got his moment, but who gives a shit anymore? Like, it's gonna be hard to give people a reason to care about CM Punk now in the main event, because it was like, all people are gonna think about if CM Punk were to come back right now and main event to WrestleMania 37, 38, 39, what have you. People are gonna be like, man, he should have gotten there way sooner. That's all people are gonna say now, and it's super distracting. It's really upsetting. Um, that someone like CM Punk, who busted their ass up, no matter, the guy may have had some anger issues. The guy may have like been an asshole from time to time, but overall, he did his job, and all he ever wanted was the main event of WrestleMania 30. Instead, you just, you know, make him lose to Lesnar. You made him lose to The Rock. You made him lose to Taker. All the part timers. Well, CM Punk was gonna bust his ass off each week. That was a big fuck you to everybody. So yeah, CM Punk, one of the guys who deserved the main event more than anybody, got screwed over, and what can you do? That's it for this WrestleMania debates. Yes, CM Punk deserved the main event, but unfortunately, that probably will never happen. Episode 11 is next, and this one is going to be called "Who Should Have Ended the Undertaker's Streak." Stay tuned for that one. It's me, the ALE Double X Prince. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and until then, I'm out.